Ladies and gentlemen, control and manipulation have shaped human history in ways both obvious and subtle. From political systems to personal relationships, the ability to influence others is a powerful force, one that can either uplift or oppress. But how does manipulation work? Why are some people more susceptible than others? And most importantly, how can we recognize and resist it? First, we must understand that true control is rarely about brute force. It is about influence gaining compliance without direct confrontation. Manipulators understand human psychology deeply. They know that people respond more to emotions than to logic. They use fear, guilt, and the desire for approval to shape behavior. This is why propaganda, peer pressure, and even personal relationships can become battlegrounds for control. Now, who is most vulnerable? People who lack self-awareness or struggle with insecurity are prime targets. If you do not know what you believe or where you stand, someone else will define those beliefs for you. This is why manipulators often target individuals at their weakest, those who are uncertain, afraid, or seeking validation. So how does manipulation work? It employs tactics designed to bypass rational thought. Gaslighting, for instance, makes someone doubt their own reality. Fear-mongering convinces people to act irrationally in the name of security. Conditional approval, only offering love or respect when obedience is ensured, forces people into compliance out of fear of rejection. These strategies are not random. They are carefully designed to control perception and behavior. But there is a way out. The antidote to manipulation is responsibility and self-awareness. When you take ownership of your choices, emotions, and beliefs, you become resistant to external control. You begin to think critically, question narratives, and recognize when your emotions are being used against you. Setting boundaries and surrounding yourself with people who encourage independent thought rather than blind obedience is crucial. Resisting manipulation is not just about avoiding harm, it is about personal freedom. A strong individual is not easily swayed. A society of strong individuals cannot be easily controlled. So we must ask ourselves, are we thinking for ourselves or are we merely reacting to the influence of others? The battle for control is ongoing, but the choice remains ours. The nature of power and influence. Control and influence are fundamental aspects of human interaction. Whether in politics, workplaces, relationships, or social structures, the ability to direct or shape the behavior of others is a skill that has been both admired and feared throughout history. However, true control is rarely achieved through overt force. Rather, it operates through more subtle mechanisms: persuasion, authority, and psychological influence. Understanding how these forces function is crucial for both recognizing manipulation and developing personal autonomy. At its core, control is about creating order. People seek to impose structure on their environments because chaos is unsettling. A sense of predictability provides security, and those in positions of power often justify their control as a means to maintain stability. However, the desire for order can also become oppressive when it crosses into excessive dominance. Leaders, institutions, or individuals who seek control without accountability may use coercion, misinformation, or psychological pressure to maintain authority. The distinction between healthy influence and manipulative control lies in intent and execution. Influence, when used ethically, involves presenting information, inspiring confidence, and allowing others the freedom to make their own decisions. Teachers, mentors, and leaders influence through guidance rather than coercion, empowering others rather than diminishing their independence. On the other hand, manipulation distorts reality, preys on vulnerabilities, and limits personal choice, often without the individual even realizing they are being controlled. One of the most effective methods of control is through emotional leverage. People are far more likely to be influenced by emotions than by rational arguments alone. Fear, guilt, shame, and a sense of obligation are powerful motivators, and manipulators use them to their advantage. When a person feels indebted, insecure, or afraid, they become more compliant and less likely to resist authority. This is why emotional narratives, rather than logical reasoning, dominate political rhetoric, advertising, and even interpersonal relationships. Social hierarchies and power structures also play a crucial role in control dynamics. Institutions, whether governmental, corporate, or religious, often reinforce their authority through traditions, social norms, and psychological conditioning. People are taught from a young age to respect authority figures, sometimes without questioning whether that authority is just. This conditioning makes individuals less likely to challenge those in control, even when they recognize something is wrong. Yet, control is not always imposed externally. Often people voluntarily submit to control because it relieves them of responsibility. Freedom comes with uncertainty, and for many, the comfort of being told what to do outweighs the burden of making independent choices. This is why some individuals willingly conform to restrictive ideologies or manipulative relationships. They trade autonomy for a sense of security. To navigate the complexities of control and influence, self-awareness is essential. Recognizing when we are being influenced, questioning the motivations behind authority figures, and developing independent, critical thinking skills are the best defenses against manipulation. True strength lies not in controlling others, but in mastering one's own mind. The more we understand the psychology of control, the more empowered we become to resist it. Psychological vulnerability. Manipulation and control do not work in isolation. They require a willing or unknowing participant. People who fall under the influence of manipulation often do so because of psychological vulnerabilities that make them more susceptible to control. These vulnerabilities can stem from emotional needs, past traumas, insecurity, or even a lack of self-awareness. Understanding these weaknesses is crucial in developing resilience against manipulation. One of the biggest factors that make people vulnerable to control is uncertainty. When individuals are unsure of themselves, their beliefs, or their place in the world, they become easy targets. A manipulator thrives on this uncertainty, offering a sense of clarity or direction in exchange for obedience. This is why people who feel lost or directionless are often drawn to strong, authoritative figures who appear to offer certainty. Whether in personal relationships, political movements, or social groups, those who seem confident and unwavering in their convictions can easily draw in those who lack a strong sense of identity. Another key vulnerability is emotional dependency. Many people have a deep-seated need for approval and belonging. Manipulators exploit this by offering conditional acceptance, making their approval or affection dependent on compliance. This tactic is commonly seen in abusive relationships, toxic workplaces, and cult-like organizations. If someone believes their worth is tied to another person's validation, they will go to great lengths to maintain that approval, even at the cost of their own well-being. Fear and anxiety are also powerful tools of control. When people are afraid, their ability to think critically is diminished, and they become more likely to seek protection from someone who claims to have the answers. Fear-based manipulation is used in many aspects of life, from media that exaggerates dangers to personal relationships where threats, emotional or physical, are used to maintain control. When fear overrides rational thinking, people become reactive rather than proactive, making them easier to manipulate. Past experiences and trauma can also create vulnerabilities. Someone who has been repeatedly exposed to control or manipulation may come to accept it as normal. Childhood experiences play a huge role in shaping susceptibility to manipulation. If someone grows up in an environment where authority is never questioned, where love is conditional, or where fear is a constant presence, they may unconsciously seek out similar dynamics in adulthood. Their baseline for what is acceptable has been shaped by their past, making them more likely to tolerate manipulative behavior. A lack of self-awareness and critical thinking skills further weakens a person's ability to resist control. If an individual does not take the time to examine their own thoughts, emotions, and beliefs, they may unknowingly adopt the narratives of those around them. Manipulators take advantage of this by presenting their version of reality as the only truth, discouraging independent thought, and creating environments where questioning authority is seen as disloyal or dangerous. Overcoming psychological vulnerability requires self-reflection, confidence, and a willingness to question external influences. The stronger one's sense of self, the harder it becomes for others to impose their will upon them. Recognizing personal weaknesses is not a sign of failure, it is the first step toward true personal freedom. Tactics of manipulation. Manipulation is not always obvious. It often operates beneath the surface, using subtle psychological tactics that influence a person's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors without them realizing it. Skilled manipulators understand human psychology deeply and exploit natural cognitive and emotional tendencies to gain control over others. Recognizing these tactics is crucial in resisting manipulation and maintaining personal autonomy. One of the most insidious techniques is gaslighting. This occurs when a manipulator makes someone doubt their own perception of reality. It can be as simple as denying something that happened or as complex as systematically distorting facts to make the victim question their own memory and judgment. Over time, gaslighting erodes confidence, making a person more dependent on the manipulator for clarity and validation. For example, in toxic relationships, an abuser might say, "That never happened," or "You're overreacting," even when the victim has clear memories of a situation. The goal is to make the victim distrust their own mind, making them easier to control. Another common tactic is guilt tripping. This technique plays on a person's sense of morality and responsibility. Manipulators use guilt as a weapon to make others comply with their demands, often framing themselves as victims to elicit sympathy. Statements like, "After everything I've done for you, how could you do this to me?" Or, "If you really cared, you wouldn't question me," are classic guilt-tripping strategies. The goal is to make the target feel responsible for the manipulator's emotions, pressuring them into submission. Fear-mongering is another powerful tool, particularly in politics, media, and social groups. Fear overrides rational thinking, making people more susceptible to control. When individuals are constantly exposed to alarming messages, whether about societal collapse, personal threats, or exaggerated dangers, they become more likely to seek protection from the very people spreading the fear. This creates a cycle where fear justifies control. In extreme cases, entire populations can be manipulated into accepting oppressive policies under the illusion of safety. Conditional approval and love are especially effective in personal relationships. Some manipulators use affection and validation as a bargaining tool, offering warmth and support only when the target behaves in a desired way. If they step out of line, affection is withdrawn. This can create an addictive cycle where the person being controlled constantly seeks approval, even at the cost of their own values. Parents, partners, and authority figures sometimes use this technique, knowingly or unknowingly, to shape behavior. Another subtle but dangerous tactic is information control. This involves restricting, distorting, or selectively presenting information to shape someone's perception of reality. Cults, authoritarian regimes, and even manipulative individuals use this to ensure that their version of events remains unchallenged. By limiting access to alternative viewpoints, they make it difficult for people to question their authority. To defend against these tactics, individuals must cultivate self-awareness, critical thinking, and emotional resilience. Recognizing manipulation when it happens is the first step to resisting it. By understanding how these techniques work, people can reclaim control over their own minds and refuse to be manipulated by those who seek power over them. The role of responsibility and free will. The most effective defense against manipulation and control is a strong sense of personal responsibility and free will. While external forces, whether individuals, institutions, or societal pressures, may attempt to shape our thoughts and behaviors, ultimate control over our lives rests in our ability to make conscious choices. When people take ownership of their thoughts, actions, and emotions, they become far more difficult to manipulate. Responsibility is the foundation of personal strength. When individuals refuse to take responsibility for their lives, they leave themselves open to external control. It is easier to allow someone else to dictate what to believe, how to act, and what decisions to make than to take full responsibility for one's actions. Many people fall into manipulation because they seek an authority figure to provide them with structure and certainty, avoiding the discomfort of making difficult choices. However, trading personal agency for comfort ultimately leads to dependence. True freedom requires embracing the burden of responsibility even when it is challenging. Manipulators thrive on emotional reactions rather than rational decisions. They exploit fear, guilt, and confusion to pressure people into submission. However, when a person develops emotional intelligence and self-awareness, they become more resistant to these tactics. Recognizing when emotions are being used against them allows individuals to pause, analyze the situation logically, and make a conscious choice rather than reacting impulsively. Independent thinking is another crucial defense. Manipulation often relies on groupthink, the idea that if enough people believe something, it must be true. This is why propaganda, misinformation, and social pressure are so effective. When individuals fail to critically evaluate information, they become passive participants in someone else's agenda. However, those who cultivate intellectual independence question narratives, seek out diverse perspectives, and think for themselves. They do not allow their beliefs to be dictated by others, but instead form their own conclusions based on reason and evidence. One of the biggest traps of manipulation is the victim mindset. While genuine victims of injustice do exist, some people adopt a victim mentality as a way to avoid responsibility. They blame external forces for their problems and expect others to solve them. This mindset makes people easy targets for control because they become dependent on those who promise to fix their situation. Manipulators often present themselves as saviors, offering solutions that come at the cost of personal freedom. However, when individuals shift from a victim mindset to one of personal accountability, they reclaim power over their own lives. Free will is a skill that must be developed. It requires the ability to recognize when external forces are influencing our decisions and the courage to resist them. This does not mean rejecting authority entirely, but rather ensuring that one's choices are made consciously rather than out of fear or pressure. The stronger a person's sense of responsibility and self-determination, the harder they are to control. Personal responsibility and free will are the greatest defenses against manipulation. By strengthening self-awareness, emotional resilience, and critical thinking, individuals can protect their autonomy and live according to their own values, rather than the agendas of others. How to resist manipulation? Resisting manipulation is not just about recognizing when it is happening. It is about actively developing the mental emotional strength to prevent it from taking hold in the first place. Manipulators use psychological tactics to gain control over others, but those who cultivate self-awareness, critical thinking, and emotional resilience can break free from their influence. True freedom comes from mastering one's own mind, setting firm boundaries, and standing confidently in one's own beliefs. Cultivating self-awareness. The first and most important step in resisting manipulation is self-awareness. Manipulators target insecurities, fears, and blind spots, using them to control how a person thinks and behaves. If you do not know yourself, your weaknesses, triggers, and emotional vulnerabilities, you are far more likely to be influenced by those who do. To develop self-awareness, reflect on your emotions and reactions in different situations. Are you acting out of fear, guilt, or obligation? Recognize recurring patterns in your relationships. Do you feel consistently pressured, belittled, or controlled? Question your beliefs and where they come from. Have you truly examined them, or have they been shaped by external influences? The more aware you are of how you think and feel, the less power others will have over you. Strengthening critical thinking. Manipulation often succeeds because it bypasses logic and appeals directly to emotions. Fear, guilt, and urgency are used to prevent people from thinking clearly. This is why it is essential to develop critical thinking skills to analyze situations objectively rather than react impulsively. Ways to sharpen critical thinking include asking questions. Who benefits from me believing or doing this? What evidence supports this claim? Seeking alternative perspectives. Exposing yourself to different viewpoints helps prevent falling into ideological echo chambers. Slowing down decision-making. Manipulators create a false sense of urgency. Taking time to think critically before making choices reduces the risk of being misled. A strong thinker does not accept information at face value but evaluates it carefully, making them much harder to deceive. Setting firm boundaries. Manipulators thrive when their targets lack clear personal boundaries. They push limits gradually, seeing how much they can control before the person resists. Setting strong boundaries is crucial for maintaining autonomy. To enforce boundaries, recognize when you feel uncomfortable. If someone consistently disregards your feelings or pressures you, they may be testing your limits. Clearly communicate limits. Saying no is a powerful tool against manipulation. Affirm, unapologetic response signals that you will not be easily controlled. Follow through with consequences. If a manipulator disregards your boundaries, distancing yourself may be necessary. A person with strong boundaries is much harder to manipulate because they make it clear they will not tolerate coercion or exploitation. Developing emotional resilience. Manipulators exploit emotions to control their targets. If someone can make you feel guilty, fearful, or obligated, they can influence your decisions. Developing emotional resilience means learning to regulate emotions rather than allowing them to be controlled by external forces. To build emotional resilience, practice self-regulation, learn to recognize when emotions are being used against you and take a step back before reacting. Strengthen self-worth. When you value yourself, you are less likely to seek validation from those who manipulate. Surround yourself with strong, independent people. A supportive environment makes it easier to resist manipulation. Emotionally resilient individuals cannot be easily swayed because they remain grounded in their own sense of self rather than reacting to external pressure. Speaking the truth with courage. One of the most effective ways to resist manipulation is by being honest and direct. Manipulators rely on confusion, deception, and emotional coercion. Speaking the truth, even when uncomfortable, dismantles their power. To develop this courage, practice assertive communication. Clearly express your thoughts and needs without aggression or apology. Accept that not everyone will approve. Manipulators use social pressure to control others. Being willing to stand alone when necessary is a mark of true strength. Hold firm to reality. Do not let gaslighting or distortion shake your confidence in what you know to be true. Truth is a powerful weapon against manipulation. Those who refuse to be silenced or intimidated are far more difficult to control. Resisting manipulation is not about becoming cynical or distrusting everyone. It is about developing the skills to navigate a world where control tactics are often used, whether in personal relationships, workplaces, or society. By cultivating self-awareness, critical thinking, emotional resilience, and courage, individuals can protect their autonomy and live life on their own terms. In the end, the strongest defense against manipulation is knowing who you are, what you stand for, and refusing to let anyone else dictate your reality.